Hello and welcome to a special bonus edition of Self-Inflicted Oral Nostalgia, a Fans Guided by Voices podcast. My name is Jeff Gomez and I'm the author of Zeppelin Over Dayton, Guided by Voices album by album, which will be published this June by Jawbone Press. It's available for pre-order now wherever books are sold. I recently talked to Doug, the musician and mastermind behind the website gbvguitar.com. We talked about Bob's style of playing, unsung musical heroes in the history of the band, and what are the best GBV tracks for budding players to tackle. Here's our discussion. Okay, I'd love to start with your background as a guitar player. When did you start playing?
Well, I took lessons for about a year, and I think this was when I was 11 or 12 years old. And at the time, my guitar teacher was teaching me a lot of blues, a lot of music theory. So I was learning actual musical notation back then. When I got in 8th grade, I met someone who showed me a guitar magazine that had guitar tablature in it. And this is just an easier way to write music for stringed instruments. I mean, it's not only easier to read, but it also makes more sense for an instrument that has a certain amount of strings and different frets on each string. So it shows you where to put your fingers and everything like that you don't get with standard musical notation. So after about a year of taking guitar lessons, I quit and started picking up more from guitar tablature, started buying Guitar World and all those kind of guitar magazines. And, there are lots of books that you can buy that have standard notation and tablature. So I was a little reluctant to come around to it at first, but it definitely makes more sense, and I found that I was learning a lot more that way. So
sure. And then who are some of your favorite players, either today or through history, like Hendrix or someone like that?
Yeah, Hendrix was definitely an influence. I grew up listening to a lot of whatever my dad was playing, which was the Beatles, Rolling Stones, and Queen. So
nice.
I mean, they all had fantastic guitarists. Sure. I grew up loving Brian May's work, all the layers of guitar harmonies that he was doing, George Harrison, of course, but then I started getting into Hendrix on my own. And I guess because of what I had learned in my guitar lessons, like I said, my teacher did a lot of blues stuff, so Hendrix had that kind of style too that I kind of latched on to and was influenced there for a while. And
how many guitars do you have? Do you have any favorites? Do you have like a ton?
I don't have a ton, no. The first guitar I ever owned was a Seagull acoustic, and I still have it. It's my only acoustic guitar, except for one that I saw out by the curb and picked up and brought home one day, thinking I would fix it up. But no, I have one, just that one acoustic, and I have one electric. It's a Telecaster, Telecaster Deluxe. So it's got the double humbuckers and a Stratocaster-looking headstock.
Nice, yeah.
And that's it.
So turning to GBV, how did you first discover the band? How did you come upon them?
Well, when I was in high school, this is probably like 1996, I was in high school, and I got into a band with a few guys. The lead singer kind of talked me into buying a 4-track recorder.
Nice.
So, yeah, you probably read what Robert Pollard wrote about the recent Alien Lanes reissue, but he referred to the 4-track recorder as an instant gratification machine.
Yep.
I don't think there's a better way to describe it. I got so hooked on that thing, I just started filling cassettes and cassettes full of songs. I was writing a lot of songs at the time and doing a few covers on there too. Eventually, I compiled a bunch of those songs onto a cassette and started passing that around to friends and the other guys in the band. The bassist in the band took a listen to it, and since I didn't really know what I was doing on a 4-track, so it sounded real lo-fi like GBV. He said, "There's this band I think you would really like. This stuff reminds me of Guided by Voices and early Built to Spill." So he put together a cassette, and it was all Guided by Voices stuff. Side 1 he called The Early Years, and side 2 he called Albums, and I think he called it Albums and Rarities. The first song he put on side 1 was I'll Get Over It. And looking back, it seems like such an odd choice for trying to get someone into Guided by Voices.
Yeah.
To lead off with a track like that. He could have started with, Motor Away was out at the time, or My Valuable Hunting Knife. Lots of songs from Alien Lanes seems like they would have hooked someone a little quicker than that, but it became my favorite cassette. It stayed in my car until I didn't have a car with a tape player anymore. Now I don't know what happened to it, but anyway, that set me on my path. From there, I think Alien Lanes was the first album I bought by them, and it's still my favorite.
Okay.
It's just the songs were just so fun. That's what really drew me in.
Sure.
It was like, the recordings didn't sound great at all. The lyrics sounded like nonsense most of the time, but everything had a great beat. It was just a lot of fun. So
and I'm
that's
sure
what kept me in love with them.
Nice. And I'm sure, have you seen them live over the years?
Yeah, so the first time I saw them live was probably shortly after I turned 21. I don't think I saw them before that. And for a while, I was traveling a little bit. Once I started getting into the shows and really enjoyed them, I started going to other states to see them for a little bit during, I guess this was like the Universal Truths and Cycles and Earthquake Glue tours. And that was, in my college days. And now I'm older and have kids, and now I just see them when they come to my hometown.
Sure.
Yeah, but probably, I don't know, 20 or 25 shows.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's always fun, They're just, the energy never lets up. This new lineup is incredible.
Yeah.
When I first started seeing them, like I said, it was Nate and Tim and Bob and Doug, and I think John McCann was on the drums the first time I saw them.
Yeah, he was just there for that with that one record. So you have a website, gbvguitar.com, that features tabs, and it's not just GBV tracks that you've got Pollard's solo stuff, you've got Boston Spaceship, Circus Devils. What made you want to start the site?
Well, when I first got into Guided by Voices, there wasn't much to learn their songs from. We had the old gbv.com site that had a chords page, and you could just learn a song, type it up, in a little text file, and send it off to Rich, and he would put it up on the site. And it was great for what it was, because that's what we had at the time. We were just all fans playing guitar and learning from each other. And I guess after the electrifying conclusion, they just stopped updating that site entirely. So years went by. We didn't have really anything except, I guess, ultimateguitar.com, which is not a favorite site of mine. It's kind of annoying. They've got a lot of ads popping up. They've got trying to pressure you into downloading their app. I've been fooled into it once or twice. But, there wasn't really a lot going on for a long time, and I just felt like we were due for something new. I was sitting around learning tons of Pollard songs on guitar, and was getting kind of worried that I would forget a lot of them, so I wanted to write them down anyway. So I decided I was going to start up a site, and then I kind of floated the idea out there on the Guided by Voices Facebook group, and it got a positive response, but I think at that time my mind was already made up. I wanted to do it, so I guess the thing I struggled with a little bit was trying to find a good format for the tablature. I didn't want to go the traditional route of, the text files, because sometimes they didn't format properly. I just wanted something a little cleaner looking that would be pretty consistent from song to song on the site. So I came up with something eventually and got it out there.
And how long has it been then? So when did you start it exactly?
So I started it in April of 2017.
Okay.
And then later in that year, I was working on another website totally unrelated to music or anything that sort of started demanding a little bit more of my time and attention. So gbvguitar.com kind of went into a bit of a hiatus for a while. And I didn't want this to happen, but I got busy with other things. And then in March of 2018, I decided I was going to bring it back and try to commit myself to posting a new tab once every week. And I have been for the most part. I think I've taken a week or two off, if I was on vacation or something like that. But I came back and started up a Facebook page to go along with it. So I try to keep the fans engaged there and post, any relevant links, let them know when there's a new post out. Sometimes I like to do a poll and they can vote on which songs they want.
Sure.
So, and then they can make requests on there too.
And how many songs have you done at this point?
I just did the 127th song this week.
Wow.
Yeah, this month I've been doing all requests. I did a classics month in January where I decided to stick to a theme of playing or tabbing out only the songs that, as I defined, classics, the ones that they're going to play at every show.
Sure.
So Cut Out Witch is on there, and Tractor Ape Chain, and I can't remember, that Shocker in Gloomtown.
Nice.
And those have been pretty popular. I think a lot of people still want to learn the classics when they come to the site. And then this month I decided to pick out a bunch of the requests that people have made and focus all my time on learning some of those and putting them on the site for them.
So how do you figure out a song? Is it just by ear? Do you have to slow them down? Do you do anything tricky to isolate certain tracks?
Yes, I do. A lot of it's just careful listening, but I do have software called Riff Station, which was something that Fender had put out as a free download for a while. And I don't think it looks like they've discontinued development on this entirely, which kind of a bummer, but I'm glad I got my hands on a copy while it was out there and free. But it lets you isolate, as best as it can, especially on a lot of the older tracks where everything's just kind of lumped together. But it gets pretty good results once in a while where you can go to one channel and kind of hone in on that guitar in that channel, and then you can slow it down without changing the pitch. And once in a while I do change the pitch if something was recorded at a slower speed. A lot of the stuff that Bob records on his boombox, a lot of the Suitcase stuff, will sound like a slightly lower pitch than what my guitar's tuned to. So instead of retuning my guitar all the time, sometimes I'll just use Riff Station to change the pitch of the song, and makes it easier to learn.
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and then how long does it take if you sit down, you're going to do a song? How long is it usually, on average, in terms of figuring it out, but then doing that formatting on the site? Because again, the site looks really nice and it's laid out in a really nice way. How long is the process from beginning to end usually?
Well, thank you. And getting it on the site is probably I might spend an hour per week doing that. And then learning the song, it just depends on how difficult it is. Sometimes there's just one part that is just too stubborn. I can't really figure it out. So I have to spend a little bit more time with it. But if it's a song I already know and I can just sit down and write out the tablature for it, then, about an hour. Okay. Maybe an hour and a half, something like that.
Has there been ever a song that was just that A, I guess you couldn't crack, or B, that really took you a while and you couldn't quite figure out what was going on there?
One song that I learned was Christian Animation Torch Carriers. When it goes into the solo, Nate's rhythm guitar gets really buried in the mix on the recording. So that one took me a while to figure out what the heck he was playing there. So I used a combination of Riff Station. I scoured YouTube for any live videos I could find. I went through all my collection of live recordings, and eventually I think I figured out what he was doing there. I can't confirm it, of course, but
sure.
Yeah, that was a tough one. And then sometimes there's something that I just can't figure out, and once in a while I'll actually ask Doug.
Nice, and he'll get back to you.
Yeah. I started up a conversation with him because I got to interview him for the site back in May of 2019. And the way it started out was I reached out to him on Facebook. This is right after Warp and Wolf came out. And I just wanted to tell him, the guitar work on this album is fantastic. I wanted to ask him about the screechy ape sound in Tiny Apes. So he answered that question. And based on his answer, I kind of got the vibe that this is a guy that likes talking about his guitar work. So I thought, well, let me put this out there, and said, hey, would you mind if I did an interview with you on this website that I run? And I was thrilled. He said, yeah. So I got some questions together, sent it over to him, and after a few weeks, he sent me his responses, and I was just blown away. Totally floored that he was cool enough to do this.
Oh, that's awesome. And
yeah.
I want to talk more about him as a player in just a minute. And I want to sort of get back to sort of you tackling these songs and sort of GBV songs in general. On average, how would you describe the level of GBV songs throughout the years in terms of technical or even just melodic sophistication? Are they pretty advanced? Are they pretty easy?
It totally runs the gamut, I think. I was thinking about a song like "Smothered in Hugs." This is a song. I think it's one of Pollard's greatest vocal melodies, but the chords are the same throughout. The verse chords same as the the chorus chords, and it's just dead simple. But I think he still writes songs like that from time to time too. So I think I feel like he has gotten a little more complex in his writing. It's different. It's definitely different. Where he is in earlier songs, you'd hear him play a lot of full chords, and now he seems to have more arpeggio stuff, or a lot of the techniques that I talk about on the site, like where he'll play like a D chord, for instance, and then hold that shape and just slide it up on the neck to a different spot. Mm-hmm. And though he has been doing that for a long time, it just seems like, I don't know, it happens more frequently now.
Sure. And then if you're comparing GBB tracks to some of Pollard's other projects, like his solo or some of the side projects, is there any difference in the technique, or is he really just, when he writes, and no matter where it goes, you find the same kind of, hallmarks of his playing?
Yeah, I find that to be the case. I think it just gets a little colored based on who he's working with. It's like a lot of the Todd Tobias stuff has a distinct sound to it, but it's definitely, it's not quite the same as Boston Spaceships or ESP Ohio. I feel like he could take any of those songs and play with any of the incarnations or the different people that he's worked with, and it'd still sound like him. It's Sure. Just, I don't think he really changes styles much from one project to another, where it's him, at least, where he's the one writing the songs, as opposed to, Circus Devils or Lifeguards, where he's just putting down the vocals.
Sure. Are there any other sort of things you've noticed over time? You mentioned that sort of D chord shape that he uses, and I know on the site you've talked about his patented open string drone chords. Any other sort of hallmarks of technique or chord progressions that you find that he uses or goes to a lot?
Arpeggios is one that he really uses a lot, and I was trying to find examples of him doing kind of a traditional arpeggio where you'd hold down an entire chord and pick through it one string at a time. He doesn't do as much of that, except for on Window of My World is one of the ones that is a good example of that. For the most part, what he's really doing is just holding down, one note on, let's say, the bottom string, and then he'll play the fifth string without any fingers down, and then the fourth string without any fingers down, and just keep moving his finger around on that bottom string, with the other two kind of droning open. So I guess the open string drone technique and the arpeggio technique kind of fall hand in hand once in a while.
Sure.
Another one that Doug mentioned when I interviewed him, he called it the bar chord -1. On my side, I call it dropping the bass. It's basically if you started with, a C fifth chord. I don't want to get too technical, but where you're holding down a string with your index finger and then another string with, let's say your ring finger, and you move your index finger down just one note. That's a really popular move for him too.
Okay. Well, and then tied to that, where do you see his stuff being rooted musically? I don't really hear, blues licks or a 12-bar structure. Is there anything you can hear that he took from other players or genres? He's talked about his love of pop and psych and prog and punk. Do you see any traces of that, or where do you see that he gets some of the inspiration for his playing?
I kind of feel like you'd have to listen to everything he listens to, maybe to find the answer. And who has time for that? If you've seen his record collection,
oh yeah.
I mean, where to begin? He must just have, all these things running around in his brain so that when he picks up his guitar, whatever comes out is just, an unconscious mix of all of his influences. I can't really pin it down to one thing or another. I've heard people say, certain songs really sound like the Beatles, and that's true to a point, but not entirely like the Beatles. So there's always something else going on in there too.
Yeah, that's what I think is just what I like about him too, is because I get a lot of tired of some of the British stuff that's real blues based, and I just get tired of a 12-bar format. And what I like about Bob's stuff is you can't hear where it came from. Like you said, it's this total amalgam or stew of all the stuff that he's listened to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, going back to when I was saying about Smothered in Hugs, that kind of simple chord progression versus something like one I just learned the other day is Red Bodies from Let It Beard, where it's just all over the place. I like the songs where he kind of treats it like a collage, where it's kind of a happiness is a warm gun type of feel of taking 3 or 4 songs that he's written and just throwing them all together. So it's in a totally different place where it ends than how it began.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I feel that he's doing that more now than he did before. Like the last record with like You're the Hard Hitter and Cul-de-sac Kids and Tiger on Top from the previous record. Do you see any changes from his current stuff in the last couple of records versus some of that 90s stuff? I know you've talked about on the side of his mature songwriting style. What's a hallmark of that?
That definitely being able to move around to so many different things. I've heard it a lot on Let It Beard, and I think it just ties to the band that he's got now can really handle those kind of changes. Not to put anyone else down, but comparing the current output to what he was doing in the reunion era of the classic lineup, all that run of albums were a lot simpler in songs in terms of song structure. I think he knows that the guys he's got in the band now can really handle anything that he throws at them, so he can put out something like Year of the Hard Hitter where it just completely changes and then changes again, and they can keep up with it.
Sure. Well, so let's jump into that then. So can you rank some of your favorite players from the group's history and sort of contrast their styles? You've got like, a Mitch Mitchell or even a Tobin through to a Doug Gillard.
That's a good one. I would definitely put Doug at the top. I mean, he's a solid player. He can play any style, as we've heard on the Cash Rivers stuff. I mean, that was just crazy. It sounds like there are 50 different guitarists on there, but it's all him. His style is, being able to handle all that different kind of moods that Pollard has. In contrast with earlier guitarists, I don't know. It's kind of tough to say. Mitch Mitchell is just total rock, and I think that really worked really well with what Pollard was writing back then. And Tobin, those guys really were part of that sound at the time. And I'm not sure how to answer this one.
Yeah, no, I mean, because I play guitar, but I'm not nearly as sophisticated as you are, and I can't pick these things out. But to me, it sounds like Mitch was like the classic power chord guy, and got the Gibson, and he's got the Marshall stack, and he was just a power guy. Whereas what
Sure.
I like about Doug is he can do the power stuff, but he's got a much lighter right hand and with rhythm, and he can do some of that jangly stuff. And I think it seems as being a lot more versatile.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as ranking, I don't know if I could really come up with a good ranking for them, but they've all had their signature sound and style, and they all brought something to the band that I think really complemented what Pollard was writing at the time.
Sure. So let's stick with Gillard for a second, because he's been with him for pretty much his longest term collaborator, if you add up all the years that he's been with him. Do you have any favorite musical moments from him? I would say that the thing that I always love is that second part of the solo in Cheyenne, which is which is really adept, I think, but it's also really musical. He's not just showing off in an Eddie Van Halen way, but it's really it flows, but it's impressive to listen to, and I just love that. Any favorite Gillard moments?
That's a good one, because it makes you think about the different ways you can play a solo. You can just go off and improvise, which we've heard him do too. But when you have a solo that sounds that good, you want to play it pretty much note for note every time you play it, because that's really melodic and great. I think one of my favorite solos by him too is Things I Will Keep.
Yeah.
I learned how to play that one recently, and I think I gained an even deeper appreciation for it. It's got the whole section with some harmonics in there. And then there are just little moments scattered throughout the records. There's the one guitar part on Lurk of the Worm that I just love hearing every time it comes on, right after Bob sings No Questions, I Dearly Love the Monster, and Doug has that lead right there. I think it's just fun stuff like that just jumps out at you, and not necessarily a whole solo every time.
Sure. Well, trying to find some of Gillard's musical fingerprints, do you see him being indebted to any certain style? Like, are those solos, are those rooted in a pentatonic, which is rooted in a blues, or do you see him trying to avoid blues looks as well?
Yeah, his stuff doesn't really sound too bluesy to me. And maybe it's just that Bob's music doesn't lend itself to that particular kind of style. I'm not sure. I'm not really familiar too well with the different kinds of modes or anything, though. So
I'm not either. The only I only
yeah,
know pentatonic. That's why I tried to throw that in there.
yeah, I know. I've heard of that one.
Okay,
Mixolydian, that's a good one.
there you go. Ionic, is that
Not
one?
sure what it is. Yeah, I think it is.
There
Or
you
that's
go.
just a column. I'm not sure.
There you go. Doric, that's what they call it. So, as a musician, are you ever disappointed that there aren't more solos? I mean, I really can only think of 3 or 4 over 30 years of records. I mean, I get bored by Rush or even Dinosaur
Hmm.
Jr. in an indie rock context where like every song has to have a solo. But as a player, you ever itching to have Gillard be unleashed a little bit more than sometimes he is?
It's tempting to say yes, because it's always fun to hear him rip out a solo. But honestly, it would get kind of boring if every song did have a solo too. I guess somewhere in between would be kind of nice. But
Sure.
I always felt that what he's playing really complements the song really well. He knows where to put the leads, exactly how much to restrain himself. We know he can play a lot more, but it's not always what the song calls for.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right. There haven't been that many solos, really.
Well, as a musician too, does it ever bother you with how loose or ramshackle GBV is, either live or on record? I know you noted how sloppy and drunk Nate Farley got on the Austin City Limits taping.
Yes. I mean, there have been some disappointing moments live before. As far as the recordings, I love it all. I mean, if what they put down was slop, then that's what I love about it. But I have felt that, when I saw Nate and he was falling over before, I felt kind of like, you got this great opportunity and I feel like you're squandering it,
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a little disappointing, but Bob's gotten like that too. They had to cut a show short one time because he got kind of drunk and hurt his back or something like that, and it was a bummer, but oh well.
Yeah. So then, talking about Bob as a player or getting a handle on his style is kind of hard because it's a weird situation because he's the writer of the songs, but he's usually not the guy you hear on the record. That being said, we know from a lot of the demos that guitarists in the band, sometimes right down to the solos, are playing what Bob wrote. And then there's cases like Please Be Honest or the Teenage Guitar albums where it is Bob's playing. So what do you think of him as a player?
He seems to have a really fantastic sense of rhythm. He's got a kind of unique strum. It's really hard strumming that he does sometimes. If you listen to what's that Boston Spaceship song, Ate It Twice, where it starts out with that really hard strumming acoustic, and that's from his demo that he sent Chris Lazarenko, and they just kind of spliced it into the rest of the song. So his rhythm is on point, and then we've heard him do some leads too. Todd Tobias has mentioned a few of the spots where Doug played lead guitar. I was listening to on Elephant Jokes today, When a Man Walks Away. It's got that great lead guitar that kind of runs throughout the song, and that was Bob playing. So I feel like he for not having taken any lessons or anything, he's really a pretty great guitarist. Maybe not the most technically proficient, and I guess that's okay. He plays what needs to be played, and he's writing the songs, and they're turning out fantastic. So it's good stuff.
Well, and speaking of too, he's a guy who. And he was interviewed in Guitar Magazine maybe a decade and a half or so ago, and he was saying that I don't even know what I'm playing. I even get the sense that he's not a guy who has more than 2 guitars.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
He's not at all a gearhead. So I want to talk. You were talking about that insistent rhythm, and that's actually a real pet peeve of mine. Those relentless downstrokes. I think punks call that the downstroke derby. To my ears, that makes the songs sound so stiff, even especially when it's on an acoustic. And I just like to hear a little bit more of a shuffle, I guess, in the rhythm. Does that strike you as a legitimate criticism?
It could, at least for the songs where he's the one playing. I don't know if, like you said, when he puts his demos out there to the band members, if they try to just copy what he's doing exactly or not. But I mean, I guess if they're the ones doing the strumming and they're doing all downstrokes, it might be because that's what he was doing on the demo. But no, it's never really bothered me.
Okay.
I'll have to give that a closer listen now that you mention it, actually.
It's just I remember going through August by Cake, I think it was, or might have been Zeppelin Over China Plus because it was a double album, and I'm just like every song was just like ching 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 ching,
Mm-hmm.
and then that doesn't give Kevin March much to do on the drums because then all he can do is just stick with that beat. And again, and maybe it's because I'm not a very technical player, so the place where I get most of my variety is in my right hand, just with the rhythm and just doing
Mm-hmm.
little things like up, down, up, and sort of playing with that, and that gives songs life and kind of makes them breathe, I find.
Yeah, that's a good point. But also, I mean, you don't find many instances in their songs where it's just straight strumming throughout. A lot of times it's broken up by, a little riff or something else going on, like an arpeggio part or something like that.
Sure.
So,
So I saw that rig rundown with Doug Gillard, and he said he sticks with one guitar all night and that it's in standard tuning. Are there have you run into many or any songs that have alternate tunings, or does the majority of what Bob writes just stick into a standard tuning?
yeah, from what I understand, Bob doesn't do any kind of alternate tunings, but there are occasions where the band tunes down a half step when they're recording a song to match what he had on his demo, to match the pitch of that. Like Downer, for instance, on Sweating the Plague, they tuned down, and then live they just played in standard tuning. And then a lot of the Boston Spaceship stuff, Chris Lazarenko did the same thing and tuned down a lot. There's one song that I learned recently, Artificial Light, that I tried playing in standard tuning, and it just didn't work. There was no way to do it. So what I found out was tuning the G string all the way down to C sharp made the most sense. And then I had to think, well, how did this come to be? How did Bob find a guitar that was tuned this way? Did he do it himself, or was like someone putting on a new guitar string on that G string and didn't tune it up all the way, and then he got his hands on it, started picking along and said, oh, that sounds good. Let's go with that.
Yeah, it's funny. I could have sworn I read somewhere way back in the day about the I Am a Scientist riff is played that way because he picked up a guitar that only had those 3 strings on it. And on the video he's playing some guitar that's missing a couple of strings, and so that seems like a very Bob kind of thing to do. He's sort of in the basement and he just kind of picks it up and goes with it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised about that either, because a lot of times if you hear a riff that he's written, it's sticking to, either one string or one set of strings that are all adjacent to each other. So yeah, that could be.
And have you noticed anything interesting that he's done over the years, or the band has done, with, like, in terms of rhythm or time? I know he loves prog, and there's a whole, a lot of bands do this, crazy 7/8 kind of stuff. Does the band ever fall into that? Or are they pretty much standard tuning 4/4 on the floor?
I don't think they are. That's another tricky one for me. I never learned timing that well, and it makes me think of something that like John Lennon wrote, where it switches times constantly, and I don't think he was aware that he was doing it. I don't think he was consciously saying, I'm going to go to 7/8 now for this part, and I'm going to go 3/4 for this part. And so I think it is possible that there are instances of that in Guided by Voices music also, that Bob isn't really making that conscious effort to be weird or anything. That's just what sounded good, and that's what came to be. But yeah, like I said, I'm not great with knowing what time signature things are in, so that's a tricky part for me whenever I'm tabbing something out on the site too. I try to put things into measures once in a while, but I'm never really sure if I'm doing it right, and I'm sure someone could point at it and say, no, you got this one wrong.
Sure. Yeah, I get the sense that Pollard's a feel guy, and maybe it is in a weird time signature, but he's just doing it because that's just the way that he's feeling it, or tapping his foot in that moment.
Right, yeah.
Well,
or playing something a certain amount of times, like, play this 7 times.
Yeah. So I feel Pollard's known primarily for melody and for his surreal lyrics. Are there any aspects of GBV from a musical point of view that you think don't get highlighted enough? Like he should get more credit as an instrumentalist, or the construction of the songs?
Definitely in the construction of the songs, yeah. Like I was saying earlier, with him putting together just a bunch of different songs together to make something cohesive and whole, the collage style that I talked about.
Yeah.
And you can hear it a lot on if you listen to like the Let It Beard boombox demos, Tourist UFO, for instance, he's got in like 4 different parts, which makes me wonder, is this something he ever had to sit down and play from front to back? Because it starts in one spot, and then you hear him hit the stop button, and then it picks up in another spot. And that the whole thing, it just sounds baffling to me. I don't know why you would want to do something that way, but I don't question his methods at all. It seems to make more sense to me to actually learn the song from front to back and then hit record and play it through.
Sure.
And be like, all right, here's what I have.
Yeah, and he seems in a good way, and we can't really argue with the results of being stubborn in the way that he creates things. I'm still amazed after all this time that he's still working on like a boombox.
Yeah, right.
You can get like a laptop for $400 that sounds really, really good, and he's just like, no, I don't want that.
Yeah, well, he'd have to learn it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think you've mentioned that your favorite GBV record of all time is Alien Lanes, but you've made a lot of mentions to some super deep cuts, like elephant jokes and the solo stuff. On a scale of 1 to 10, how big a fan are you, or how many of his records do you have? Have you heard? Do you try to go out and really hear and listen to everything?
I do try to listen to everything. I just try not to collect everything. Whatever I can hear on streaming works fine for me. I'm kind of a digital guy myself, so I'm not one of the completists that has to have like everything on vinyl. I had 2 Guided by Voices actual, vinyl records in my possession at one point, and I lost them both. So, and they were good ones. I had Edison's demos.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I remember getting that from, I think, Luna Records back in the day when he came out. And then I had the Cum Engines record.
Yikes, did you just lose them? Because those are both like $100.
I know. What happened was I left them at my parents' house because they had a record player. And then when I moved down, I left them there. And then years later, I went back and went looking for them downstairs. I was like, hey, you guys see my records? And they're like, what were they? And they told me they'd thrown them out.
That is
thrown them out. Like, come on, you wouldn't even ask someone who used to live here, hey, do these happen to belong to you? Because this one had a bad word on it, and we just didn't want it.
Not even by the curb or something? I don't know if that's worse. I don't know if that's worse than selling it for a quarter, because then at least it's still in circulation. I don't know.
Yeah, that's my thought. Yeah. Or, they could have donated it, and then someone would have been like, whoa, can't believe I found this in a donation bin. And then at least maybe a Guided by Voices fan has it again.
I still think there's a really hip garbage man out there somewhere that they picked it up before it went into the bin.
I would hope so. I really hope so.
So the whole point of gbbguitar.com is to teach people how to play Pollard songs, and it's been really great to see the Sweating the Covers project on the Facebook page. There have been I think hundreds of covers at this point. I myself did one, not very well. But what would you, for folks that are at home and are trying to learn GBV songs, are there any off the top of your head that you think would be easy for beginning players to try to tackle?
There are definitely easier ones. And I think a lot of them have maybe been covered already. Because some of them, some of them are just easy strumming ones. A lot of Tobin Sprout songs are pretty basic in song structure and the chords that he's using for a beginner to pick up. They're basic to the point where if you ever see one of his set lists, he'll just write F, A, wow. C. So he remembers how to play it. But in terms of songs that Bob's written, there are definitely fewer, but Jar of Cardinals is an easy one because you can keep a lot of your fingers in the same position throughout. And I mentioned Smothered in Hugs already. That's a pretty simple one. And Postal Blowfish, I don't think I've seen anyone do that one yet, but that's, maybe one chord and 2 other notes. I'm not sure that I'm in tune too much with what's easy to play and what's not anymore. Because I've been playing for a long time, and I've been playing Pollard songs for a long time. And for me now to say something as easy as, it has only a few chords and doesn't jump around as much as a lot of the other stuff that he is writing.
Sure. For me, I'm an open chord guy, which is why I love the Toby stuff.
Yeah.
So anything that's not too many bar chords that don't have to switch around a lot. I love. So how about what are something what's a song that you really just love to play that, if there's people out there that've got a little bit of chops, what would you send them toward that's maybe not, the typical, the ones that you've uncovered and said, wow, this is just a lot of fun to play?
One that I don't have on the site yet, but one of my more recent favorite ones to play is Physician from Surrender Your Poppy Field. That really keeps your fingers moving around the fretboard a lot, which is what I love. I love the songs that are interesting to play that way.
And is there anything people should keep in mind as they're learning or trying to play a GBV song, trying to channel their inner Pollard?
I think my best advice would be to remember that Bob has no formal training. If he can play it, I'm sure you can play it. Persistence and I know guitar is tough to pick up when you're starting out, but it's all about practice and sticking with it. If there's a song you want to learn, just play it over and over. You'll get it.
That's awesome, Doug. Thanks so much for your time today.
I appreciate it, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
That's it for the show. Be sure to check out Doug's website at gbvguitar.com. The site is a labor of love, so please consider giving him a donation so that he can continue with his fine work. Visit my website, everygbvlp.com, to hear past podcast episodes covering all 29 GBV records and pre-order Zeppelin Over Dayton, Guided by Voices album by album, wherever books are sold. Thanks for listening.